Hallo, und zum Start
Hello.
gleich mal eine Frage.
And the question to
Kennt ihr
begin.
das, dass der Hund sich daneben benimmt
Do you know
und
a situation where your dog is
und Stress das sein
misbehaving
kann und dass ihr euch deswegen manchmal sogar ganz
and
anders
this
verhaltet, als ihr
causes
euch das
stress
vorgenommen habt?
and you behave quite differently than you intended?
Und euch da fragt, kann man dann nicht einfach mal
And if you know this and you're asking yourselves, couldn't we change something with both of us? Then you're here in the right place. My name is Hanna Regenbogen. I'm a dog trainer and a wingwave coach. And I'd like to thank Cora Besser-Sigmund and Harry Sigmund for inviting me and allowing me to speak here about my work with people and dogs and how to use wingwave in dog training. A few words about me. I live in Schleswig-Holstein near the city of Kiel. I have two giant schnauzers and I have a chihuahua. And these three dogs help me when I'm training and when I'm coaching and in seminars. And in wingwave coaching. And if you come to training because you want to change something with your dog, let me tell you a story. As an example, the story of Marion. Marion has a husband and two children and a poodle. This poodle has a lot of problems. Of course, the poodle doesn't think it has problems. The poodle thinks that other dogs are a problem. And that's why the dog says, well, when I'm walking out with Marion, it's no secret. I can bark at a dachshund. I can be loud. Doesn't matter if other people are watching. And of course, the poodle has reasons for doing this. But it doesn't care at all how it behaves at this moment. But Marion is very concerned. She does care, and this is pretty stressful for her. She has to literally hold the dog on the lead, and that pulls at her shoulder. And she's noticing that it's becoming embarrassing because she's a very polite person. And she would like, if she's seen with a dog, to be seen positively. And now she thinks that neighbours are watching her. And at one point somebody did say something to her and says, why have a dog if you can't look after it properly? And to be honest with herself, she asked this question to herself as well. She knows she's a capable person. She has two great children. She's got a good job. How can it be that I cannot train the dog? And this dog is leading to her doubting her own capabilities. And she has to manage all of this. Her husband helps a bit. But sometimes he said something like, well, you wanted the dog and now we've got this problem. And this doesn't make the things better in the family either. And this is becoming a subject which is affecting everybody. She can't just tell the dog, poodle, go for your walk on your own. And she can't just leave the dog on the street and walk on. The dog is so embarrassing, she can't just pretend that she doesn't know it. Or if the dog is off its lead and goes to other dogs, she can't just walk away. So she is always part of the problem and quite literally linked up to the problem because when we're with the dog on a lead. And the people around us evaluate us and judge us by the behavior of our dog, or at least we feel that way. And many people tell me, and the way they tell me, it gets very, very emotional. This is extremely worrying for people because the expectations that you have a nice family dog have been disappointed. Because nobody gets a dog to say, I'd like to have a really stressful life. That's why I'm getting a Labrador. We think a dog will enrich our lives, and we'd like to give the dog a nice life and freedoms. And you can have freedom if you can live with freedom. And so there are difficulties in communication between the dog and the person, because the dog has different expectations of this relationships than people do. And in a way, we're speaking two different languages, although we might have the best intentions. And understanding gets very, very difficult. And you've reached this point, the dog isn't doing what you want, it's stressful, your thoughts are going round and round and round. And
So der
I
Klassiker.
don't want to meet another dog,
Hat man es also
and you're
mit
afraid. And this causes
und
psychological
Problemen gesprochen,
barriers.
die wirklich nur noch nach Uhrzeit
And
spazieren
that
gehen.
means that certain people decide to go walking only at times when they might not meet people, or they go into quiet places to avoid meeting other people, to try and avoid this stress.
Die Menschen haben zwar Hunde, die jetzt sich irgendwie schwierig verhalten, aber die
So
haben ja keine Monster.
people have got dogs that might be difficult, but these are not monsters.
Gefühle und Gedanken,
This is all about feelings and
dass wir
thoughts.
weniger Freude am Spaziergang
And in
haben
the end, we don't enjoy the
und
walks.
uns eben nicht nur mit dem Verhalten des Hundes rumplagen müssen, sondern auch einfach
We have to
mit dem Stress.
deal with the behavior of the dog and with the stress it's causing
Es
us.
geht dann natürlich erstmal viel darum, was wir alles nicht haben
And so
wollen.
a lot of this is about what we don't want, but I want to come to something else. I want to come to a piece of good news. We can change this with dog training and the wingwave method. And I'll give you a few specific examples of this from training and from wingwave coaching later. That's what today is about. How wingwave can make it possible to deal with this stress, to deal with your pounding heart, to get rid of it when you're walking your dog, and just to wave it away. It seems very simple to say wave it away, and the reason it's simple is that it really is simple if you know what you're doing. And so that you can also understand this method and how it works and how it can help you, I will just briefly talk a bit about this method so that you will understand the examples that I will give later. The examples of this change. Wingwave is an emotions, coaching of the emotions, looking at all of these different unpleasant feelings that we can have, fear, sadness, being annoyed, shame, all of these things. Wingwave can free you of all of these when you're walking your dog, so that you feel good and stable, and when there are conflicts, you know how to deal with them, and so that ultimately you enjoy walking more. And to make these changes tangible quickly, there are two key parts to wingwave. First of all, we find out what exactly is stressing and difficult, and then we work on and dissolve this stress, and you can literally feel it physically, mostly, and you can feel the change directly. And if you know a situation where your understanding on the one hand and your feelings on the other are going in two different directions, then you know how this kind of obstruction, this emotional obstruction feels. It's as if the left side of your brain, which is responsible for logic and language, your left side of your brain is saying it's only a dog. It's only meeting another dog. We've done it 8,000 times. So we'll just behave and we'll do what is necessary and everything will be fine. And maybe we've even learned the tools to do this from dog training. We know what to do, we know how to act. And so really it should all just work. But then there's a feeling and a physical reaction. Our blood pressure raises, our heart starts beating, we start to sweat, our breathing changes. And then we get ideas, what will happen if something happens? Or what will people think of me? Or maybe they think I'm not capable, or maybe somebody will get angry and it will be embarrassing. And then the emotions and thoughts come, and we can't just think them away. It doesn't matter how often we tell ourselves it's just meeting another dog, I don't need to be stressed. We still have these feelings. And that means that the left side of the brain, responsible for logic, and the right, responsible for feelings, both pleasant and unpleasant feelings, then these two sides of the brains are not working well together at this moment. And the reason that this happens is that we've made experiences in our lives which are saved in our emotional brain side, and we haven't really worked through them And to work through these processes in a targeted way, we have to research and find out what are our unconscious stored triggers of stress that lead to us not feeling good and lead to certain behaviors that we didn't want to do. Why does my blood pressure rise when I see a dog? And why do I start worrying about what other people are thinking of me when my dog barks? It doesn't matter. But why? And the thing is, we can't logically and consciously think about this and find the reasons, because these causes are often in the past. Maybe there was one or several events which have left such an emotional impression on us that we've not really overcome them. And these events or contexts have formed our unconscious, and we feel that they are logical. And then something in the present triggers this again, and it's linked with fear or helplessness or shame or something like that. And this brings us at this moment back into the same emotional situation from the past, but we cannot explain this and we don't know why. And we can't do anything cognitively against it. And our unconscious doesn't care about this, doesn't mind at all. This is the same situation as then, and all the systems become active again. So they have the same problem and we don't feel good. And in order to research these stress triggers, we use myostatics. The test is this muscle test of the hand. You create a ring with your first finger and your thumb and keep it closed when I try to pull the fingers apart. And I do this when I talk in a certain way about the things that you've described to me, about your experiences, about the emotional difficulties that you have. And this means, and that's a great thing, it means that you don't have to tell me which factors lead to your stress, for example, when you meet another dog. But I can find out very exactly what is your situation, which stress situation prevents you from experiencing meeting other dogs in an emotionally better way, in a way that you can understand it. When your fingers open, when we have a weak reaction, and this shows the stress. And when your fingers stay closed, this is strong, and that means you can deal with this, and so we don't have to look in more depth at that. And that's why I say this is a very quick and very precise method of getting to the heart of the matter. And when we have a stress reaction, then we can find out exactly which emotions and situations, which emotion is connected to this. Is it fear, or is it something else? Is it shame? Or is it some picture I've got from when I was empathetic and some theme about myself? And when we found that out, we get to the second part of the wingwave method, and that's how we work through the whole thing and dissolve it. This is through bilateral hemisphere stimulation. The hemispheres are the two halves of the brain, and bilateral means crossing over them. We bring them together. We simulate phases which bring these two sides of the brain together and dissolve the obstruction. I wave the hand, that's why we call it wing or wave. And these are the moments which you have in sleep, and we sort them out during the day. And this happens every night while you're sleeping, and we simulate these phases of your sleep.
Das heißt, auch ohne diese ganzen wissenschaftlichen Erkenntnisse aus der Hirnforschung, die es gibt.
We're using scientific knowledge from research into the brain and knowledge of what happens when we sleep, and the idea that you can sleep over it and you get better. And we stimulate this in a waking situation. So this is why we talk about waving stress away.
Und nun ist es ja erstmal so, dass wenn sich die Hundehalter bei mir melden und auf
When
der Suche nach einem guten Hundetraining
people with dogs come to me and they're looking for a good dog trainer who might be able to solve these problems, then we have to first describe the problems. Perhaps you have a few experiences of your own, a few challenges of your own, and we can have a few examples which we will notice in wingwave coaching reveal a lot of stress triggers. Some dogs have even pulled their owners over and injured their owners. Or when the dogs attack other dogs or other dog owners, then this is the very difficult situation, especially when dogs are on leads and aggressive on leads.
Oder halt nur, wenn nichts Besseres zu tun hat. So. Und verbunden ist das Ganze häufig auch mit einer Aufregung der Hunde. Und
this is frequently connected to the dogs being excited,
so wie ich das denke.
and they don't behave how I want them to. And the dog then goes its own way. We always have to look at specific cases, but what I can say about my work is that the idea of dissolving or dealing with these situations is that we use a social level, a communication between the dog and the person, so that the dog owner is in a situation where it can say yes and no and can make decisions which the dog will adhere to, and then the dog will see the human being or its owner as a reliable partner. And then we have to ask ourselves, how does the dog get the idea that it can behave in a certain way, and how can the human being react to it to change it? And this includes setting limits and also giving positive feedback and giving appreciation to the dog, affection, positive impulses, and setting the parameters that the dog can behave in such a way as the owner wishes. So everybody talks to their dogs and communicates in this way. We give them sweets, or we use our body language, or we try to be strict. We try to condition dogs, use our body language. But we often notice that the training methods are only partly successful. This is often because we see behavior as an isolated phenomenon or an isolated problem, but in fact it's a symptom we can work with. And if we don't, we often only see the things that really annoy us. For example, if a dog is pulling on its lead, this is a kind of excitement. A calm dog does not pull the lead. So there's not really useful to look at the theme of leashes in isolation, but to look the other way at the subject of excitement. If the dog doesn't come when I want it, I don't have to work on the theme of cooperation, or when I have to say no. Because I don't manage to forbid the dog from annoying another dog. So what we find is that a lot of people find it very difficult to set limits, very difficult to say no, which we find in wingwave coaching. And all of this is very basic, and that's why in training I look at the whole picture, the big picture, and not isolated incidents. Now we've spoken about the two themes, we've explained what wingwave coaching is, and now how I work with dogs, and now we get let's bring the two things together. this looks like this. Somebody comes to me with a dog and wants a wingwave coaching. And very quickly we can see through the language how the dog owner actually perceives its dog through the language that he uses. How does he describe the dog? How does he describe the physical relationship? We look at that, and then in wingwave we come back to the way in which the language expresses the relationship to the dog. And so we don't use wingwave with work at the dog at this stage, but later when we're outside with the dog, maybe using my dogs, then we will bring my dog and your dog together and create a live situation and look where are the stressful moments, so that the dog owner can feel and experience a situation which was previously very unpleasant, now in a different way, much more neutrally, in much more calm and positive and stable manner. And so what we do is we talk about the daily routine with the dog, and then we ask the owner to imagine now it's time to go for a walk with the dog, and that's where the stress begins. Because I'm already thinking of the future, and I'm thinking, well, I hope I don't meet anybody, and already my thoughts are spinning, that I'm imagining that there's going to be a problem and there's no chance that the walk will be good. And thinking back about dog training, this is not a good attitude, because it's a thought which limits the scope. Dog training should make us more competent in dealing with situations, should make us able to develop strategies to deal with it, things that we can then put into practice. But if I'm already creating limits in my mind before I even leave the door and thinking about what could go wrong, then this attitude it's a shame. So in dog training we can deal with this, but it's much better if we can find a way of dealing with our own thoughts and removing these obstacles in our mind. And of course, ultimately dogs do notice how we feel. They notice our moods. This doesn't mean we always have to be in a great mood, but dogs do know if we have a plan. They do know if we can take decisions, if we can act decisively or not. I don't mean that we need to be like Buddhists in order to be good dog owners, but I do mean that our thoughts will influence how we behave, and they will influence our body language, and dogs notice this. And the better we are in this respect, then the easier it is to deal with our dogs. This doesn't mean you cannot become angry, doesn't mean you can't be authentic, because emotions are part of our lives. But it just means that we can get into a stable situation after the emotions very quickly, and so that the emotional heritage that we have doesn't prevent us from reacting to the situation as it is. And then we could say, actually, it's okay. And then we would test the walk, and things could work really well. Leaving the house with the dog on its lead, until we then think of the first problem, and that's when the dog is pulling at the lead. That would be a first example. What could the old emotions be that are there, that are triggered by a dog pulling on a lead? Even if we say okay, he's pulling the lead, and it's annoying, then we suddenly have this anger and we don't know where it's from. And in one case we found out that this stress actually was a problem with the owner's knee. And we found out that in her youth she took part as a competitor in gymnastics court tournaments. And just before one of these, she had a cycling accident, a bicycle accident, and hurt her knee.
Im ersten Moment würde man vermuten, naja gut, also so ein Sturz mit der Verletzung ist ja auch eine größere Sache.
And then we would imagine injuring your knee is quite a big thing. But in the test, this was not the issue. It was more what it meant for her. It was connected to anger, disappointment, and sadness because she could not take part in the tournament that she had prepared for. And she had to watch her friends and colleagues participating as an observer. And this was so difficult that she never really dealt with it emotionally. And these are the kind of surprises that we can have. Things that are completely unconscious in the present, and we try to find them out and find out where this reaction might come from. A simple thing like a dog pulling on a lead, and yet she still noticed she was angry with the dog, and this could well be the background. And that's very exciting to find that out. And we can wave away all of this emotional debris. And then we can see the situation for what it really is. The dog is pulling on the lead, and we can work on this, and we can deal with it. So we were still thinking about walking the dog, and the dog owner imagined exactly the route that they would take. And then we noticed when in thoughts they came to a certain place in the walk, there were different examples. Perhaps a specific experience at that place where something had taken place, something that had shocked them or annoyed them. And often what people are afraid of is that the dogs might bite each other, not just meet each other, but fight each other. Because frequently these are experiences with dogs off leads that are walking freely and experiences with their owners. And so examples are that I frequently hear are a big dog came up to us and I called and asked the owner to call its dog back, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. And our dog owner then wanted to be able to control the situation but could not. And that leads to the alarm bells ringing in your brain, and you feel frozen or lamed and brought into a situation which you would like to control, but you cannot. And in that moment, you feel helpless, omnipotent, and this causes stress. So this is a classic situation. It's the fear of getting into contact with dogs that you hadn't agreed with. That's one thing. That people feel that they can't prevent this, and they're, in a way, victims of the other dog owner. And stress can also come when it's not something that you experience personally, but you've seen other dog owners experience it, and we have a picture of it. That can be enough for us to have a problem that we think is our own problem. And often I also encounter the fear that your own dog might be bitten and you can't help it. Of course, nobody wants their own dog to be bitten, but the biggest stress in this is the idea that I was not able to help my own dog, because people are emotionally convinced that their dog would be personally disappointed by them. The dog would say, I trusted you and you didn't help me. And if these really are dogs that have had bad experiences, or these concerns might be linked to other themes, and the dog would say, look, once again, you didn't manage to help me. And the theme of guilt is then a big theme. And the other thing is when your dog might injure another dog or another person, and we don't want to be the reason that someone else is hurt or injured. We want to be someone who's polite, someone who cares for other people. And the dog, our dog, can bring us into a situation where we cannot meet our own expectations for good behavior. And the dog could be the reason why other people are not feeling good, and this is a real problem for me. And then we have ideas that people have in other aspects of life, and they ask themselves, why am I always the one who has this thing happen to me? Or why do I always meet people who are idiots? Why me? These are situations which we experience in other contexts in life, and this has very little or nothing to do with meeting other dogs. And this brings us to other subjects from our private lives, from our professional lives. And we can often deal with a lot of old baggage in this way. It's not only about us and our feelings, and frequently it's about the feelings of the other dog owners. And in this case, we cannot understand their feelings. We might find them egoistic and intolerant, and we cannot believe how intolerant they can be. And frequently, this is related to experiences from family or from school contexts. I had an owner who found this cold-heartedness, as she called it, but it came from a teacher from her early days in school who had forced a school friend to stand at the front at the blackboard, although this friend could not solve the maths problem that the teacher had given her, and everybody felt uncomfortable, and this teacher forced her to stay in this situation for too long, and the dog owner, as a child, found this completely unjust. And this problem then was in the present situation. And often we are the recipients of anger, and the typical situation is the other dog owner attacks us verbally, criticizes us. Sometimes even the police are called, and that's even more shocking. Or maybe it's fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. What will happen next? Will I be punished? What will the consequences be? And perhaps even a fear that someone might take my dog away from me. Or what does my dog actually think of me? And so we have imagined scenarios just because we meet another dog owner. And all of this is accompanying us more or less consciously when we're walking with our dogs. So if the aim is to be able to safely take the dog off a lead in training, and if we can achieve that, we could celebrate something that we can now do which we couldn't do before. And still, a lot of people never let their dogs off the lead, thinking it's not good, and the only reason is they don't feel good about it. Maybe he will run away and never come back, or he'll be run over or shot by a hunter, and he'll never come back. And this never coming back is an absolute scenario which we get very frequently. Wingwave can help here, because if you cannot achieve something in dog training because the dog has its limits, it cannot do any more, we can help ourselves. An example of a woman with a shepherd, German shepherd, and after training she would have given the dog all the freedom, but she still was not able to let the dog off the line because as a child she had a hamster. That wasn't the reason alone. But the emphasis here is on had a hamster, because one of her friends had an idea of showing the hamster a bit of the world and letting it out of its cage and taking it into the garden. And the dog owner, former hamster owner, was not sure that was a good idea. We haven't really got a proper cage for the dog or fence. And they lost the hamster. It ran away. And so as a child, she hadn't taken care of her hamster and the hamster had disappeared. There was a happy ending to this story. The hamster was found again in the flower bed. But this had led to a link. If people had said, the development of your dog is great, you could let him off the lead, the feeling came back and that she would not let anyone tell her what to do. Letting an animal free was not a good idea in the past. And this feeling of feeling guilty about this was so deep. And the guilt was of being persuaded to let the hamster free. So the theme of guilt was a door opener to her past, to her family history, which we were able to talk about and work through. And then there was another theme that came in training. There are situations where obstructions come, which we can work with to help in the training process. I work about the theme of limits or borders, and using the word correction leads to the alarm bells ringing in many people, taking us back to our childhood, because limits and borders were often associated with punishment, and these bad memories come back. Paradoxically, the people who come to me consciously really want to work with borders and they understand it logically, but there is something in them which is blocking this and blocking the ability to say no. And this is not saying no is not necessarily something bad or unfriendly, but many people it was difficult. And of course the dog owner saying no is not necessarily going to break out in a sweat, but nonetheless the internal system is causing stress. And the dog can learn that it is possible to have a dialogue with you, and that doesn't help. The dog needs a limit. And on the theme of when a dog should lie down, we had a dog owner who had a problem with this. She was a left-hander, and she had been forced by her parents to write with her right hand, and she had to sit at the table and practice writing until she'd finished, and she hated this. And she noticed this feeling when she was asking her dog to lie down and forcing it, or giving other people instructions. The problem of giving instructions is often in the background here, and it's about not wanting to be like that. Another theme is the relationship to the dog as such. People tend to give a dog a character, and they think, well, he's doing that deliberately, he doesn't like me, he's too critical, maybe the dog is even jealous. I've heard that too, the dog wants to make a fool of me. These things are interpreted into the way the dog is looking at you. Often I get people coming to me who breed dogs, or do sport with dogs, or exhibit dogs. And often they're so tense and nervous that the dogs react to this, and so all their work doesn't work in the training. In the third step then,
ist die Wingwave-Methode tatsächlich in
we use wingwave method in the live situation.
von einer dritten Person,
I need a third person to
zum
help.
Beispiel als Spaziergänger,
This third person with a dog could be a walker
Hundebesitzer stressig
who says or does something that is stressful for the dog owner.
Sachen wie, können die mal spielen, meiner tut nichts und so.
Perhaps she would say, let them play, my dog won't do anything, and the dog owner thinks, oh no, perhaps something will happen. Maybe we should not do this.
Oder dass wir nachstellen,
Or we
Hundebesitzer
simulate situations where the dog owner is looked at in a negative, critical way by other people.
Also guckt dann mein Kollege mal
So my friend, my third party, will look critically at my dog owner,
ne? Oder der guckt genervt oder tut so, als ob er
or
Angst
he'll
vor dem
pretend to
Hund
be
hat.
afraid of her dog,
Zum Beispiel die Bitte, seinen Hund anzuleihen.
or will ask the dog owner to put the dog on a lead and say something very critical.
Dem Kunden vielleicht
Whatever it is that perhaps,
wurde, worüber er sich sehr geärgert hat,
as my customer has really been confronted with, and bringing in, which brings in the old stress.
Und auch da finden wir immer wieder Stresstrigger, wie zum Beispiel
We can
der Rasse des Hundes.
often find stress
Mit dessen
triggers which are
oder wenn die Hunde anfangen
connected
zu
to the
bellen.
dog's race or the way it looks or the sound of its barking.
Dieses Live-Coaching, das findet wirklich ganz punktgenau nochmal Stress.
And this live coaching very precisely identifies stress factors.
Oder wie er sich bewegt.
Could be very simple things as to how another dog looks at me or how it moves, its behavior,
Tausend Sachen.
many, many things.
Ja, und wir machen das so, als würden wir also wie so ein verknotetes Wollknäuel, als würden wir da so Schlaufe für Schlaufe ab.
Imagine a ball of wool which we unwind bit by bit, and we test the situations until we have unknotted the stress, unwound the stress, until there's a feedback from the dog owner saying, it feels differently now. I had a lump in my throat before, maybe I was tense, and now it's calmer, and it's much freer and much more stable.
Und ja, das waren so ein paar Beispiele.
Those were a few examples.
Ne? Und es ist wirklich so, dass ein wirklich gutes Hundetraining, das
A
schafft,
good dog training
große Schwierigkeiten
can
sehr gut zu bearbeiten.
work out and work through
Und wenn man dann darüber
big
hinaus
difficulties.
den eigenen Stress auch noch
And if you look at your own stress as well and want to dissolve that
bessere Stabilität
and achieve more stability and balance,
der findet bei mir eben
then you can do that
im Hundetraining und das auch
with me,
Kombination mit dem.
with dog training in combination with wingwave coaching.
Und wenn euch das Thema interessiert hat,
And if this has been interesting for you
wissen möchtet, das selbst kennenlernen
and
möchtet,
you would like to do more, and maybe we could meet, I would be very pleased about that. Thank you that I could hold this talk, and thank you for your interest, and thank you for your time.